So we're going to talk about how to model systems of inequalities. And the goal of the system of inequalities is that there's going to be two inequalities, and you want to look for context clues in the question as to what to kind of pair together. So this first exercise talks about John mowing yards for his father and getting paid a specific amount. He gets $10 for mowing yards, and on top of that he gets $15 for working at a bakery. And now there's specific stipulations. It says he can work at most 52 hours during the summer, but he wants to make at least $600. So some of those phrases, at least and at most, when we're talking about those in these contexts, at least refers to the amount you can make or anything above it. So for at least, we're going to have to use greater than or equal. And at most means that's the highest value you can see. So all answers would have to be below that. So you can't work more than 52 hours. And for example, if he made $700, well, that would be more than 600, so that would cover his expenses. So the first thing is he's working 14 hours mowing and 30 hours at the bakery. Now we know he's getting 14 hours for mowing at $10 an hour. So that's 14 times 10, which would be 140. And 30 hours at the bakery, and he's making $15 an hour, so that would be 450. So, based on what we just talked about, the total that he's made would be $590. Now, when it says, does it satisfy the constraints? Well, he needs to make at least $600 to cover his expenses. So in this case, those amounts do not satisfy it. Now, part B, they want us to write a system of inequalities, and there's two parts to this. There's the money he's making and the hours he's working. So X is the number of hours he spends mowing, and Y is the number of hours he spends at the bakery. So we know he's making $10 an hour mowing and $15 an hour at the bakery, and that we know he has to make at least $600. Now what we talked about, 14 and 30 didn't work. And we also know that he has to work no more than 52 hours. So his hours of work, X and Y, have to be less than 52. So the idea with this now, if we look at part D and part C, is we're going to have to make a graph of this system. Now, the problem with these inequalities we just made up is that Y is not by itself. So we're going to have to get Y by itself for the inequalities. And usually with a question like this, we're going to have to make sure that the numbers they give us to put in later on, they have to satisfy both of the inequalities. So, in the case of part D, we're going to look at part D now. I'm going to go ahead and get Y by itself in each of the inequalities. So for the first one, I'm going to have to subtract the 10x on each side. So I'm going to subtract 10x on each side. So I get 15y. It's greater than or equal to negative 10x plus 600. And then we got to divide everything by 15. Now you want to divide the negative 10 by 15 and 600 by 15. So when I take the calculator to do that division, for the fraction part, I got negative 10 divided by 15. Which ends up being negative 2/3. And then we have 600 divided by 15, which ends up being 40. So that's one of our inequalities that we're going to graph. The other one, we're just going to subtract x on both sides. So if I subtract the x's on both sides, what we're going to end up getting is y is less than or equal to negative 1x plus 52. So now going into the graph itself, and I know this one doesn't have a grid on it, so we're going to use the intercepts to help us graph it. So for the first one, you can find those intercepts. First off, the y-intercept is 0, 40. So I'm going to put that one right here. And the other one has a y-intercept at 0, 52. So this is 0, 52. And this one right here is 0, 40. Now we got to find the point where it touches on the x-axis so that we can draw in where the second values are going to be. So if I do the first one, negative 1x plus 52, I know I see 0, 52, so I have to figure out when I'm going to get down to 0. And in this case, I'm going to press second window. I'm going to start this at 50. And you'll see I have a x-intercept at 52, 0. So I'm going to put 52, 0. I'm going to keep that as an x-intercept. I'm going to write that one down. Now I'm going to throw in the other inequality. So we got negative 2 over 3 x plus 40. Now I want to figure out when it gets to 0. So it looks like it gets to 0 at 60. So we got 52, 0 and 60, 0. So I'm going to put 52, 0 here. I'll put 60, 0 here. Now I want to connect the green and blue lines. So I'm going to draw each of those in. And the last goal is going to be the shading. So for my green line, that one's greater than or equal. So this is going to be everything above. And then for my blue line, it's less than or equal. So that one's going to be everything below. So you'll see this area up here is where we have double shaded. That part contains where the solutions are. So hypothetically speaking, if I was to do, let's say, part E, and I wanted to find a solution for this, well, I'd want to pick something that would fall in between those values. So something maybe like 242. Maybe 242 would be a value that would work. So what I could do is take those and plug them into the inequalities at the top that we had. So if I do 10 times 2 and 15 times 42, well, I know 2 and 42 is less than 52, so that satisfies the second one. And then this part here, if I do the 10 times 2 plus 15 times 42, I have a value of 650, which is greater than 600. So in this case, 242 is a solution which would be contained in that double shaded area where I marked with the red S. So when you're doing a system of inequalities, the steps that I want to just revisit again, the first step is creating those inequalities. So look for the similar measurements. So you want to look for similar measurements. Okay? You want to make sure you get y by itself. And then 3, make sure after you do the graph, you make sure you shade as well. And a lot of times on the regions, the last thing is they want you to check or find a coordinate that you know would work. Okay? So as you're looking at the test prep questions for this assignment and the questions on the following pages, make sure that you spend time going through these steps. And if you get stuck with it, ask me for help.